Let's review the while loop quickly. So the while loop is a loop, which means it's going to repeat a chunk of code, a block of code. We call it the while loop because there's another type of loop we'll deal with later on. And so far we've written while true. So even though the while loop always starts with the word while, it doesn't always have to have the word true after it. It needs to have something that Python understands as true or false. We'll see how we can change this to something else later on. Then we have the colon, and the colon is a punctuation mark we will see often in Python. It means coming next is a block of code that belongs together. In this case, coming next is a block of code that I want you, dear Python, to repeat forever. And the way Python knows which block of code belongs together is by looking at this indent, this gap, this space we have at the beginning of the line. And there are two lines that have this indent. Fred.maryForward, Fred.forward1 and Mary.forward1. These are the lines that are repeated over and over again. What would happen if I had to say here Fred.left10? So we're asking Fred to turn left by 10 degrees, but I'm doing it inside the while loop. Why is this line inside the while loop? Because it has the same indent, the same gap. So now Fred will move forward by 1 step, then Mary will move forward by 1 step, then Fred will turn left by 10 degrees, and then we go back. Fred moves forward by 1, Mary moves forward by 1, and Fred turns left by 10 degrees again. And this is what's going to repeat over and over again. Let's see what's going to happen when I run this code. And you can see there that Mary's going in a straight line, but Fred is going in a circle. Why? Because I'm moving him forward and turning him left by 10 degrees every time. So all of these are being repeated. But what would happen if I removed that indentation? Fred.left10 no longer has that gap. Well, now it is not part of the loop. So it will not be repeated with this block. Let's have a look. At the moment it's being ignored. Now, when would this line happen? Fred.left10. In this case, never. Because while true, Fred.forward1, Mary.forward1 goes on forever. And forever is forever, which means none of the code that comes after the while true, Fred.left10, or indeed in this case turtle.done, none of them will ever happen. But there might be instances where the while loop doesn't go on forever. In that case, whenever it ends, then that's when that line will happen. So that's why the indentation is really important. Let me remove that line for now. We'll see this combination of a line ending with a colon and then one or more lines following the colon with an indent very, very often in Python. It's part of Python's grammar. So it's not just the while loop that has this. Good. What do we want to do next now? I would like that when Fred reaches a certain point of the screen, I'm going to say I want this loop to end. So I no longer want it to be forever. I could take Fred or Mary, right? At the moment they're moving at the same speed. So when one of them reaches a point on the screen, the other one will also have reached the same point on the screen. Good. First of all, how do I find where Fred is? And we could say Fred dot, and one of the, we call these methods, but sometimes I'll call them functions. They're both names that I haven't used so far, but I'll use them from time to time. We will talk about functions later in this course. And I will use functions more than methods because we don't need to know about methods for now. But I'll use methods because it's good to hear the word. Doesn't matter what they are. Fred dot, forward, shape, left, color, right. You can see that these are the ones I've already used. This time I would like one called xscore. And this tells me what is the x coordinate of Fred. But if I run this code, nothing happens. And this is another key point of how programming works. On line 15, we have asked Python to give us back the value that tells me where Fred is. So in the beginning, the middle of the screen is 0, 0, 0x, 0y. So in the beginning, this should give me 0 because Fred is in the middle. Then it should give me 1 because he's moved by 1 pixel, and then 2. Now, the code is working. Fred.xscore is returning back to the program. It's giving us back this value, but I'm not doing anything with this value. I would like to be able to see it on the screen. And I have two things I could do here. I could either use write, as I've done before. Let's do it in both ways. So I could either say value equals, so I'm giving it a label. Whatever comes back from Fred.xscore, which is going to be a number, I want to store it in a box labeled value. This is the variable name. And now I can use write as I've done before, value. And you can see there, it's not very clear, but every time Fred is moving, it's writing on the screen the value, but then every time it's writing it again. So it's a whole mess. We don't want that. That's one option. The other option is, instead of Fred.write, we could use one of Python's most commonly used functions, and this is print. Now, print does something similar to write, but it's not related to the graphics module Turtle. Fred.write is something that exists in this Turtle book, which we use when we're doing these graphic things. Print is something that exists everywhere, and it will print out something to the console where the user can see it. I'll show you what that means. Notice how the value of Fred.xscore is now being printed on the screen there. That's where the output of our code is being shown. We have two types of output. We have the window with the graphics where we can see Fred and Mary moving away from each other, but then we have all the rest of the output, which is the text output, if you like. And there we can see that Fred's position is now 700 pixels from the middle. Good. Incidentally, I do not need to do it this way. If I want, I can simply say print Fred.xscore. Notice these parentheses after xscore. We're starting to see the pattern. Everything I'm going to use the word function for, like color, like left, like forward, and like xscore, they need those parentheses to say, do this command now. Even when there's nothing in the brackets. We've seen it here with done. We've seen it with Turtle, which is a similar idea. There's nothing in the brackets, but we still need the brackets. The same applies for xscore. If we want Python to tell us, to give us back the value where Fred is, we need the parentheses, but then I also need to print out that number. So there are two things: get the number in the program, but then print it out so that the user can see it. And there we can see that those values. Good. In the next lesson, we'll see how we're going to stop Fred and Mary from moving when Fred reaches a certain point on the screen.